Picture this. You pour your life savings into a down payment on an Arizona home, only to watch 7% mortgage rates and a 60% inventory surge turn your dream into a financial nightmare. Water scarcity concerns are crushing values while desperate sellers slash prices by hundreds of thousands, creating the worst buyer's market in state history. Tucson. Number 10 on our list is Tucson, a city once celebrated as Phoenix's laid-back, affordable alternative. That reputation is crumbling fast. Median home prices have climbed to $370,000, pushing far beyond what most local families can reasonably afford. The city's heavy dependence on the University of Arizona has created an economic vulnerability that's now painfully obvious as wage growth stagnates while housing costs soar. The market signals are unmistakable. Inventory has surged 25% year over year, with homes now sitting an average of 80 days before finding buyers. Price cuts are becoming routine as sellers desperately adjust to new reality. Builders who aggressively expanded into Tucson's outskirts during the boom years are now facing a harsh reckoning, with developments that once sold quickly now struggling to attract interest. What makes Tucson particularly concerning is how its modest economy simply cannot support these elevated prices. Tourism and university-related jobs don't generate the income levels needed to sustain nearly $400,000 home values. Young professionals and families who once flocked here for affordability are finding themselves priced out of their own market. The cooling migration patterns tell the story clearly. Remote workers who discovered Tucson during the pandemic are no longer arriving in meaningful numbers. 7% mortgage rates have eliminated many potential buyers, while those who remain are increasingly cautious about committing to such significant financial obligations in an uncertain market. But if Tucson's struggles seem concerning, they pale in comparison to what's happening in Arizona's retirement havens, where an entirely different demographic shift is creating even more dramatic market disruptions. Prescott. Number 9 brings us to Prescott, where Arizona's retirement dream is turning into a financial nightmare. This picturesque mountain town, nestled among ponderosa pines, became a magnet for retirees and second home buyers during the pandemic boom. Median home prices skyrocketed to $550,000, driven by affluent buyers seeking escape from desert heat and urban chaos. But the demographic shift that powered Prescott's rise is now working against it. Inventory has exploded 30% year over year, with homes sitting an average of 95 days on the market. The retirees who once snapped up properties without hesitation are now pulling back dramatically on major purchases. Economic uncertainty has made even wealthy seniors more cautious about discretionary spending, especially for second homes that seemed like good ideas when interest rates were near zero. The financial pressure extends beyond just buyer hesitation. Wildfire insurance concerns are adding significant cost burdens, making ownership increasingly expensive for those on fixed incomes. When you're facing potential insurance premiums that could double or triple, that dream mountain retreat starts looking like a liability rather than an asset. What's particularly troubling for Prescott is how dependent its economy became on this specific buyer demographic. Tourism and retirement services don't generate enough local wages to support $500,000 home prices. Without the constant influx of wealthy retirees, the market fundamentals simply don't work. Yet Prescott's challenges seem modest compared to what's happening in Arizona's true mountain communities, where elevation comes with an even steeper price premium that's proving impossible to sustain. Flagstaff. Number 8 takes us to Flagstaff, where the mountain lifestyle premium has reached absolutely ridiculous heights. This university town, perched at 7,000 feet elevation, saw median home prices peak at $720,000 in mid-2022. Think about that for a moment. $750,000 for a home in a city where the local economy revolves around Northern Arizona University and seasonal tourism. The market correction is brutal. Listings have surged 35% year over year, with properties now sitting an average of 110 days before finding buyers. The price-to-income ratio has reached completely unsustainable levels, pushing home ownership beyond the reach of virtually everyone who actually works in Flagstaff. Teachers, university staff, and service workers simply cannot afford homes that cost more than many properties in major metropolitan areas. What makes Flagstaff particularly problematic is the hidden cost of high-altitude living. Winter heating bills can be staggering, Maintenance costs are elevated due to harsh weather conditions, and insurance premiums reflect the reality of living in a fire-prone mountain environment. These ongoing expenses make homeownership even more challenging for buyers already stretched thin by massive purchase prices. The fundamental economics make no sense. You're paying premium prices for a location where job opportunities are limited and salaries lag far behind housing costs. Remote workers who drove the initial boom are discovering that mountain living comes with connectivity challenges and winter isolation that seem charming in theory, but prove difficult in practice. But Flagstaff's overvaluation pales in comparison to what's happening in Arizona's most exclusive desert destination, where luxury has reached truly astronomical and unsustainable levels. Sedona. Number 7 brings us to Sedona, where luxury has collided with reality in spectacular fashion. This red rock paradise commanded median prices of $950,000 at its peak, attracting wealthy buyers seeking spiritual retreats and investment properties. The mystical vortexes that supposedly emanate healing energy couldn't prevent the market from crashing back to earth. The numbers tell a devastating story. Inventory has exploded 40% year over year, creating an unprecedented glut of luxury properties sitting empty. Homes that once disappeared in 15 to 20 days now languish for an average of 110 days, with desperate sellers slashing prices by $100,000 or more just to generate interest. What's particularly striking about Sedona's collapse is how quickly the high net worth buyer pool evaporated. Economic uncertainty has made even wealthy individuals cautious about discretionary luxury purchases. When you're looking at million-dollar properties in a small desert town with limited year-round appeal, the investment case becomes questionable very quickly. The short-term rental model that drove much of Sedona's investment frenzy is falling apart. Properties purchased as vacation rental investments are now producing negative cash flow as tourism patterns shift and operating costs rise. Owners who thought they could rent their way to profitability are discovering that luxury markets can turn hostile faster than any other segment. The collapse in Sedona's exclusive market reflects broader problems with speculative luxury investment. But it's not just established communities facing crisis. Brand new developments across Arizona are experiencing their own devastating oversupply disasters. Morirana. Number 6 takes us to Morirana, where the American dream of brand new suburban living has become a builder's nightmare. This rapidly expanding town northwest of Tucson epitomized Arizona's master plan community boom, with developers promising modern homes and family-friendly amenities. The reality is hundreds of completed homes sitting empty, desperate for buyers who simply don't exist. The math is brutal and undeniable. New construction median prices hit $480,000, while local median household income hovers around $85,000. That's nearly 6 times annual income for a typical family, pushing home ownership far beyond reasonable affordability ratios. Even with today's dual-income households, these numbers simply don't work for local buyers. New home inventory has surged 40% year over year, creating an unprecedented glut of unsold properties. Developments that once pre-sold homes before completion now showcase hundreds of finished units with no buyers in sight. The average new construction property sits 95 days on the market, a stark contrast to the rapid sales builders experienced just 2 years ago. Desperate builders are offering massive incentives to move inventory. Price cuts of $30,000 to $50,000 are becoming standard, along with free upgrades and substantial closing cost credits. When you're essentially giving away luxury features just to attract buyers, the fundamental economics of your market have clearly broken down. The Morirana situation perfectly illustrates how quickly speculative development can turn catastrophic, but it's not just new communities facing affordability crises. Even Arizona's most remote and traditionally affordable markets are discovering that recent price surges have pushed them beyond economic reality. Holbrook. Number 5 brings us to Holbrook, a small historic city that experienced one of Arizona's most surprising and ultimately unsustainable housing booms. This Route 66 town, famous for its quirky roadside attractions and proximity to Petrified Forest National Park, briefly became a magnet for extreme affordability seekers and remote workers during the pandemic. That surge has now turned into a devastating reality check. The economics are starkly impossible. Median home prices climbed to $220,000, while local median household income remains around $38,000. That's nearly 6 times annual income in a community where the primary economic drivers are tourism and basic services. Even these supposedly affordable homes are completely out of reach for the people who actually live and work in Holbrook. The remote worker interest that briefly drove demand has evaporated as pandemic work-from-home policies tightened and people realized the challenges of rural isolation. Properties now sit an average of 120 days on the market, an eternity for homes that were once considered bargains. The Route 66 tourism economy simply cannot generate the wages needed to support these elevated housing costs. What makes Holbrook particularly tragic is how quickly the affordability mirage disappeared. Buyers who thought they were getting genuine value are discovering that isolation, limited services, and economic constraints make these properties difficult to sell or rent. The dream of ultimate affordable living has become a financial trap for those who believe the hype. But Holbrook's modest overvaluation problems pale compared to what's happening in Arizona's most aggressively speculative development zones, where builders bet everything on endless growth that never materialized. Buckeye. Number 4 takes us to Buckeye, where speculative development has created Arizona's most catastrophic oversupply disaster. This far West Valley community epitomized the build it and they will come mentality, with developers acquiring massive land parcels and launching enormous master-planned communities based purely on projected future growth. That gamble has backfired spectacularly. The scale of overbuilding is unprecedented. Median home prices in new developments hit $400,000, but listings have exploded 55% year over year, creating a landscape of empty streets and unsold properties. Homes sit an average of 115 days on the market, with builders offering increasingly desperate incentives to move inventory. The financial panic among developers is visible everywhere. Price reductions of $40,000 to $70,000 are becoming standard, along with heavily subsidized interest rates and luxury upgrade packages thrown in for free. When you're essentially paying buyers to take your properties, the fundamental economics have clearly collapsed. What makes Buckeye particularly concerning is the long-term sustainability question. Water access concerns for such rapid and extensive development are creating additional buyer hesitation, as people question whether these communities can even be supported long-term. The infrastructure simply wasn't designed for the population density that developers envisioned. Buckeye represents the ultimate cautionary tale of speculative overreach, but the crisis isn't limited to new development areas. Even Arizona's most established communities are experiencing significant market deterioration as broader economic pressures reshape the entire region. Mesa. Number 3 brings us to Mesa, and this is where Arizona's housing crisis becomes truly alarming. As one of the largest and most established cities in the Phoenix metropolitan area, Mesa's market deterioration signals broader systemic problems that extend far beyond speculative development zones. When a foundational community with diversified employment in tech, aerospace, and healthcare starts experiencing severe market stress, the entire region is in trouble. The affordability crisis in Mesa is staggering. Median home prices have reached $480,000, while local median household income remains around $70,000. That's nearly 7 times annual income, pushing homeownership completely out of reach for teachers, nurses, and other essential workers who keep the community functioning. Inventory has surged 45% year over year, with properties sitting an average of 95 days on the market. What makes Mesa's situation particularly concerning is the speculative investor retreat that's adding thousands of properties to an already oversaturated market. Investors who bought during the boom are now desperately trying to offload properties before losses mount further. Water supply concerns are intensifying buyer hesitation as people question the long-term viability of continued growth in the desert. When you're considering a $500,000 investment in a region facing potential water restrictions, the risk-reward calculation becomes very unfavorable very quickly. Mesa's downturn threatens substantial equity erosion for hundreds of thousands of existing homeowners, but the crisis reaches even more dramatic heights in Arizona's most exclusive communities, where luxury market dynamics are creating their own spectacular collapse. Scottsdale. Number 2 takes us to Scottsdale, where luxury living has become a luxury trap. This exclusive desert playground, synonymous with high-end resorts, world-class golf courses, and vibrant nightlife, attracted wealthy retirees and affluent investors who drove median home prices consistently above $900,000. The ultra-high-end market that seemed invincible is now experiencing a monumental correction that's shocking even seasoned real estate professionals. The luxury market collapse is unprecedented. Inventory in the high-end segment has surged 30% year over year, with multi-million-dollar properties sitting an average of 110 days on the market. These aren't modest homes struggling to find buyers. These are prestigious properties that once commanded bidding wars now sitting empty, while sellers desperately adjust expectations. Economic uncertainty has triggered a dramatic pullback among high-net-worth individuals who traditionally drove Scottsdale's market. Discretionary spending on second homes and investment properties has evaporated as wealthy buyers adopt wait-and-see attitudes during volatile economic conditions. When even affluent purchasers are hesitating, the luxury market fundamentals break down completely. The short-term rental investment model that attracted many luxury buyers is failing spectacularly. Properties purchased as vacation rental investments are producing negative cash flow as tourism patterns shift and operating costs skyrocket. Steep homeowners association fees for luxury communities add thousands in monthly expenses that make ownership increasingly burdensome. But if Scottsdale's luxury market collapse seems dramatic, it pales in comparison to what's happening in the epicenter of Arizona's housing disaster, where every market problem has converged into a perfect storm of financial devastation. Phoenix. Number 1, topping our list as the absolute worst place to buy a home in Arizona for 2025. Phoenix. This sprawling desert metropolis, once America's hottest real estate market, has become the epicenter of the state's housing collapse. The very factors that drove Phoenix's explosive growth are now working against it with devastating force, creating the most dangerous investment environment in Arizona. The market statistics are catastrophic. Inventory has exploded 60% year over year, with homes sitting an average of 130 days on the market. This isn't gradual cooling. This is complete demand destruction happening in real time across the nation's fifth largest city. The withdrawal of iBuyers has removed a major source of artificial demand that once absorbed properties rapidly. Companies like Opendoor and Zillow, which purchased thousands of homes during the boom, have largely retreated from the market, leaving a massive void that traditional buyers cannot fill. Widespread foreclosures and distress sales are beginning to appear as over-leveraged investors and homeowners face financial reality. Water supply concerns are intensifying during this economic downturn, adding long-term viability questions to immediate affordability problems. When you're considering a major investment in a desert city facing potential growth restrictions, the risk becomes impossible to justify. Phoenix represents the ultimate cautionary tale of speculation-driven markets. Built on endless growth assumptions and investor frenzy, the city now faces a prolonged, painful recovery that could take years to stabilize. For anyone considering buying in Phoenix during 2025, the warning couldn't be clearer. This market promises financial devastation for the foreseeable future.